the addition of former Washington Husky offensive lineman Jalen Klemm, tweeting this last night, announcing his commitment to Arizona State. Erik brought it up. We talked about Jalen Klemm going on a visit over the weekend to Arizona State. We did that just a few days ago before that visit actually happened. We talked really about what it would mean for Arizona State to get Klemm. Again, you talk about a guy that has championship level pedigree.
Yep.
Right? Played, was a part of that Washington team that obviously was runner-ups in college football last season. He's 6'5", 281. By my estimation, this is a guy that's going to come in and immediately compete for a starting spot along that offensive line. And it's something we'll talk about a little bit later in the show, but you really start to feel more comfortable with just the number of bodies that you have at that position.
10 times more comfortable than 365 days ago. And especially during the season last time where guys were dropping like flies, not really to any fault of their own, but still dropping like flies. And it really put this team in a compromised position. It compromised their quarterbacks, which then compromised the quarterbacks' bodies, which then made it, it was a domino effect. And it's always good to get an extra body in there. But this is something that you're looking at. And maybe the ranking is not as high as it was coming out of high school. Yeah. However, you're part of a unit that was just deemed the best in the entirety of college football. You're looking for more of an opportunity, and you come in and you've got a little bit of pedigree with you as well. Like your dad was a player in the NFL, has been a longtime coach. He's coached in the NFL and he's coached in college. He's currently coaching at Oregon, and you're choosing Tempe. You're going to come in and, I mean, yes, it's competing. You can't guarantee a starter spot for anybody, but by my estimation, I'd say it's more likely than not that he will be starting on this offensive line.
Yeah, Arizona State, I think now more than ever, right? You talk about the additions through the transfer portal, specifically in the trenches along the offensive line, and it still felt like there was room to grow, right?
Yeah.
Up until last night, you still felt like, oh, well, you're not as confident. But as you stand right now, you have Jalen Klemm. You return Sean Na, who was a very promising freshman. You still got Bram Walden, the Oregon transfer from last season. You've still got Leaf, your starting center from last year, on top of the other additions from the portal, like a Joey Sua from Arkansas, like a Josh Atkins, who started at Hawaii, Issei, who started at the University of New Mexico, and Ben Coleman, right, who was playing for Cal not last season, but the year before he transferred to Arizona State. Yeah. So you've got a bunch of guys that have experience playing, not just guys that were four-star guys sitting, right? Even though Jalen Klemm wasn't the starting left tackle at Washington, he still played in 7 games, which goes a long way, not just to have Klemm, but a bunch of guys from the portal that have played minutes.
Well, you're getting 4 D1 transfers. 2 of them were starters. I mean, just based off of that alone, okay, you add 1 extra starter into your offensive line depth and everything kind of shifts down a little bit. That makes a big difference. To me, on a big picture scale, yes, this is great, and we can go back and forth and talk about how great it is to boost the offensive line. We were talking about it. I mean, I remember when all of this portal stuff opened up and everybody was clamoring, where are the offensive linemen? Where are the offensive linemen? Where are the offensive linemen? Well, they're here. Yeah. They're here now. But overall, it's nice to see, Kenny is addressing what the team needed.
Exactly.
Right? All of the weaknesses that you could say going into the offseason, none of it has been ignored. Everything has been reinforced or fortified and made better than it was before. And I like the ability to take a look at your program and be real with yourself. Yeah. Because you could just roll into the offseason and say, well, we were decimated by injuries. That's not going to happen again. Next season, we're just going to roll it back similarly. Or you go, we're going to go above and beyond to make sure no matter what, we're set. Yeah. And that's what they're doing here. And again, it's one visit. It takes one visit. And then on Monday, he commits. Yeah. That speaks volumes to what they're building here. And the more that players like this commit, the easier it's going to be for the next guy and the next guy and the next guy and the next guy.
Absolutely. In something that we've talked about as it relates to Arizona State. I know we got Donald in here, Sharon in here talking about
what up, y'all?
We're finally discussing starters in depth, right? What a place to be for Arizona State's offensive line. We got Clinton here as well. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, guys. We even got Ralph in here with the forks up.
What up, Ralph?
One thing when you talk about Arizona State offensive lines in the past, right? Even last season, just because Kenny didn't have a full cycle to go out there and maybe pursue some of the guys that he wanted to, whether that be in the portal, at the high school ranks. one thing that you notice when you are on the field and you're watching some of these games is the size difference between Arizona State's offensive lines in the past versus opposing defensive lines versus other teams' offensive lines, specifically thinking even at Washington, even at Oregon. And you look at some of the guys along ASU's offensive line as it stands right now, right? Emmett Bull, 6'7", 320. He returns this season after missing the majority of last year. Kyle Scott returns as a redshirt junior, 6'5", 330, right? You've got a guy in Jalen Klemm that we talked about at 6'5", 280. Joey Sua, who ASU added through the portal, 6'4", 346. Right, Champ Westbrooks.
6'4", 346.
Champ Westbrooks, a freshman who we haven't even talked about the additions from the freshmen here in the offensive line. 6'4", 265. Samisi Tunga, 6'4", 310. Like, these are much bigger offensive line, like, starters, realistically, that Arizona State has now, which is only going to improve the rest of this offense. Look, when it comes to, like, size for football, there are positions that you can make arguments, right, where you don't need to be big to be like be dominant at this position. For Arizona State to compete in the Big 12, they needed to get bigger. They needed to get more physical, specifically in the trenches. They did it in the portal, and they did it in their 2024 classes.
And not just to compete in the Big 12, but to truly like execute the vision that they want with this offense.
Exactly.
And they've got, and we're going to tier some position groups later. And one of the stronger ones, spoiler alert, is the running back room.
Yeah.
Now, we might disagree, or the chat might disagree exactly where they fall, but I think it's safe to say that there's a lot of talent in that room. Well, what's great is that now you're just not relying on their talent. You're not just relying on your running back to make something out of nothing. Now you're giving them something and said, make me some more.
Yeah.
Right? And so if we saw what Cam Scadaboo could do last season, imagine what he could do this season with an actual line in front of him. Plus, I mean, when you look at a guy with the body build of Jaden Rashada, as high as his ceiling is, there are some big dudes in college football.
Yeah.
And they lay a good hit on him, and they get to him more often than not. You're really opening him up to injury. So not just on a scale of what conference you're playing in, because yes, you have to beef up, but I mean, there were some big boys in the Pac-12, man. Like, that was not a small football conference at all. Like, I'm loving it, man.
Yeah.